Next on the agenda, we have former Congressman J.C. Watts. Mr. Watts is the chairman of the J.C. Watts Companies, a multi-industry holding company located in Washington, D.C., with operations in Texas and Oklahoma. J.C. was elected to the United States Congress to represent Oklahoma's 4th District in 1994 and was elected by his peers to chair the Republican Conference and served 8 years on the House Armed Forces Committee. He earned his Bachelor of Arts in Journalism from the University of Oklahoma and was a quarterback for those Oklahoma Sooners. I now present you former Congressman J.C. Watts.
Brian, thank you very much. I am delighted and honored to be with OOGA this morning, and I'm having a difficult time saying that OOGA, not saying that that's the Oklahoma Oil and Gas Association. I'm having to reprogram myself, but we are OIPA, but I'm delighted to be with you, and before I get into my prepared remarks, I want to say to Karen, you know, we should probably just not have any more speeches or presentations and just take what Karen said and pass the hat, you know, and talk about just a couple of things that she said. When you consider that there's no industry in Washington, D.C., and by the way, David and Brian and Penny and Sean, they didn't ask me to say this. It's just a reality. I've been in this oil and gas space since, well, being in the state of Oklahoma. We are an oil and gas state, and you take away the oil and gas industry in the state of Oklahoma, and you wipe out 65% of our economy directly. And but being around the oil and gas industry, and you consider that this industry has literally been the national champions for our economy over the last 7-8 years, considering the jobs and the opportunities that's been created. And Karen said something that triggered a thought to me. In China, it takes 18 months or 18 weeks to get approval on something. In Canada, it takes 2 years. In America, it takes 18 years. You know, we are in a battle for the heart and soul of this industry, and there's no other industry in America that has more things before the federal government that impacts the industry more than the oil and gas business. We've got the exporting issue that we have doubled down on in the last couple of months in Washington, trying to get Republican and Democrat members to support exporting. We've got regulatory policy that we deal with weekly, and you have to live the regulatory policy because you're the ones out there on the front lines exploring and drilling wells. So the regulatory policy, and then you've got tax policy that could literally cripple this industry. You've got more before the federal government today than any other time in our nation's history. And secondly, Karen talked about public opinion. Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, back in 1995, my first 2 years in Congress, he said something that has registered with me time and time again. He said, in Washington, you are entitled to your own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And in Washington, we love to create our own facts. And the oil and gas industry, it is a great target. You know, big oil, no one tells you that 90% of the wells in America, they are produced by independents, not by big oil. depletion allowance, percentage depletion, major oil companies get no benefits out of that. So, this is my point. Karen was asking for questions, not money. I'm asking for money. OOGA is critical. Critical. It is critical for them to be on the front line in the state of Ohio and in Washington, D.C., talking about the issues that impact this industry. If you give $2,000 a year, or you give $2,000 a month, or if you give $250 a month, if you give $2,000 a month, it is critical to OOGA in defending this industry. So I'm an ordained minister, so I don't have any problems asking for money. That's kind of a standard. You share the gospel and then you pass the hat. So I just say that I hope that you will remember, and I know things get tight, that sometimes up and down, you're having to lay people off, but I hope you will remember your government affairs budget in your budgeting. Because what your government affairs team and what OOGA does, let me tell you, it is critically important. Now, in the name of full disclosure, I happen to be one of the federal guys that tells the oil and gas independent story. We work, or I do some consulting for an organization called DEPA, Domestic Energy Producers Alliance, and its royalty owners. It's independents. It's several different organizations, stripper well folks, but that make up DEPA, and it's the only organization that exists today that strictly tells the story of the independent producer. Now, I've got a little bit of background, and Karen briefly shared with you. I was oil and gas commissioner in the state of Oklahoma when I started my political life back in the early 90s. And so I have seen the industry up close and personal. So again, I just say, don't forget your government affairs, or I hope that you will put government affairs in your budget for 2015. And if it's not there, I hope you will add it, because it's just very important what they do. I want to say thank you to David Hill and his team, and Brian and Penny and Sean, and for thinking enough of me to extend an invitation for me to be with you this morning. I am no longer in Congress. I left Congress back after the 2002 cycle. I had said that when I ran, I said I was going to do it for 6 years or 3 terms. I did it for 4 terms, and after that, rather than giving my voters in Oklahoma, or giving the voters in Oklahoma an opportunity to kick me out, I left on my own terms. And obviously, as I travel around the country and speaking at current affairs events, and on college campuses, and different venues around the country, people are a little bit curious as to what I'm doing these days. I do some government affairs in Washington. I am in David Hill was giving me kudos because I am a John Deere dealer down in the state of Texas, and he's a John Deere guy. So I gave him a fist pump for having that John Deere green on his ranch. And I'm also in the cattle business in the state of Oklahoma, and I do this about 20 times a year around the country. Over the last 8 years, I've had, up until about a year ago, we had the youngest of our 5 kids that graduated from the University of Tulsa, and so we've gotten all of our kids through school, and they're out living productive lives now. Some of them are married, some of them are. A couple of them are still single, but at least we've gotten them off our payroll. And over the last 7 years, we've had 2 kids in school at any given time, and we've been paying tuition, Karen, for at least 2 kids for about 6 or 7 years. And I had here a couple of years ago, I had the United Negro College Fund that called me and asked me for a contribution, and I said, hey, you guys know I love you. I love your motto. Mine is a terrible thing to waste. And I said, someday I hope to contribute to you. I said, however, today I am a United Negro College Fund. But we've gotten them through school, and they're living, productive lives. So one of these days, I've said to my wife, I said, in about another 5 or 6 years, we're going to go move in with one of our kids and let them take care of us for about 22 years. And so, I'll tell you how that works out here in another 4 or 5 years after we've done it for a couple of years. But I am delighted to be with you. Washington is I wanted to share with you this morning some of my thoughts and opinions concerning Washington and just how crazy it has become. And I have learned, I'm grateful for the time that I was able to serve in Washington, and I have learned much in the legislative process, and how to build coalitions, how to get things done, how to create coalitions and outside groups to bring them into the fold to either block bad policy or to get good policy passed. And it's been quite a fascinating arena. I was a rank and file member for 4 years. I know Congressman Johnson, he's going to be here later this morning. I think he speaks after me, and he'll be able to relate to some of the things that I'm about to share with you. But I was a rank and file member for 4 years, and then my education of the legislative process was turbocharged because after 2 terms, my colleagues elected me to the leadership table, and I was, fourth in line on in the majority party from 1999 through 2002, and man, I got a PhD in legislative policy. I said that when I left professional football, I told my wife, I said, never again will I ever participate in another arena that the participants have larger egos than professional athletes. And then I got into politics. And boy, let me tell you, trying to corral 218 egos and personalities and free agents and independent contractors to get things done can be quite challenging. So I again did get a pretty good education, and I also got a pretty good education on how to think pretty quickly on your feet, because it's nothing to come out of an Armed Services Committee meeting or a Financial Services Committee meeting or a leadership meeting and have a reporter stick a microphone in your face and ask you some question that you had not been that you hadn't been briefed on in 2 days or 2 weeks or maybe even 2 months, and they jump out from behind pillars in the Capitol or in the Statuary Hall and ask you some question. And that happened once when I came out of a leadership meeting, and I kind of chuckled, and the reporter asked me what was so funny, and I said, you've just reminded me of this story that I heard once about this young man that worked at a grocery store, and every night at 9 o'clock they were to lock the door. Well, this particular night, it was about 9:20. This young man had forgotten to lock the door, and in through the door walks this elderly lady. And she says to the young man standing behind the counter, she said, young fella, I need to buy half a head of lettuce. Well, he chuckled, and he said, ma'am, he said, 2 things. He said, 1, we're closed. I just forgot to lock the door. He said, and 2, we don't sell a half a head of lettuce. She said, well, I need to buy half a head of lettuce. He said, ma'am, we don't sell a half a head of lettuce. She said, young man, I need to buy half a head of lettuce, and I'm not leaving until you sell me a half a head of lettuce. She was just adamant about it. And he said, look, just wait right here. Let me go back here and see what I can do. So he goes back to the produce department. He said, look, he said, there's this old hag out there that wants to buy half a head of lettuce. Well, he turns around, and this lady had followed him back there. And he looked, and he saw her, and he said, And this dear lady wants to buy the other half. Well, after she left with her half a head of lettuce, the boss came out and he said, young man, he said, I got to tell you, I am so impressed. He said, I saw that entire ordeal. He said, I am so impressed. You are so good on your feet. He said, man, you are quick. He said, where'd you learn that from? He said, oh, heck. He said, I'm from Eufaula, Oklahoma. He said, in Eufaula, Oklahoma, he said, all you have is old hags and football teams. And the boss said, young man, my wife is from Eufaula, Oklahoma. He said, what position did she play? So you do learn to think pretty quickly on your feet around that crazy place, if nothing else. As I said, and you all know, and Washington is an interesting place. And I've been operating in the federal government or with the federal government when I was a state official since January of 1991. And since 1995, when Republicans became the majority, Congress has progressively gotten worse on an annual basis. In 1995, when I was elected, Republicans hadn't been in the majority in over 40 years. Obviously, Democrats hadn't been in the minority in over 40 years. Both parties had a lot to learn, and it has been bitter sledding ever since on both sides. I retired after the 2002 cycle, and I was reminded of how far we had declined in 2009 when I was flirting with the run for governor in the state of Oklahoma, and I'd gone back home to make a few speeches, and after my first speech, a couple of consultants grabbed me and they said, hey, great speech, but let me tell you, you got to be more hostile toward the president. Well, I can't control the conduct and actions of other Republicans and Democrats. I have always tried to have a demeanor and conduct that was honorable to the trust that the voters of Oklahoma, both Republican and Democrat, put in me. Interestingly, we have gotten to the point in Washington, and in many parts of our country, we have gotten to the point that CNN and Fox News and MSNBC tells us what we should think and how we should think. And ironically, we don't watch these shows anymore in Washington looking for the truth. We watch these shows to have our opinions affirmed. Here several years back, and some of you may remember this, but several years back, the President of the United States was giving his State of the Union address, and we had a member of Congress whom I know personally, and I was quite struck by what he said and what he did because it was so uncharacteristic of him. During the course of the President's State of the Union address, he called the President a liar on the floor of the House. Well, a couple of days after that, I was on a national talk show on television, and the host, the first question he asked me, he said, what do you think about Congressman so-and-so calling the President a liar the other night at the State of the Union address? I said, I disagree with it. I think it was wrong. And the response was, well, the Democrats booed Bush. And my response was, that doesn't make it right. It just means they were both wrong. And I would encourage you, if you are watching MSNBC and Fox and CNN, hey, this is America, we can do that, but if you're watching those shows, all I ask is that at least you give Andy Griffith equal time. I've seen both sides exercise this attitude. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you is no longer in the playbook. The playbook today reads, do it to them before they do it to you. How do we get beyond this? How do we address the serious and complex issues of the day? 8 to 10 million illegal immigrants in the country. Yes, we do need to secure the border. Then what? We can't continue to allow the floodgate to be open, but neither can we say that every plan that comes forth to deal with illegal immigration is amnesty. Medicare is going broke. Social Security is going broke. We've had unemployment hover around 10%, not 5.5%, as the statistics would tell you. And I'm always baffled and quite interested in how they will say that 5.5% is the number on unemployment, and in the same breath say that thousands of people have dropped out of the job search. Friends, I submit to you that we're not 5.5% unemployment today. I submit to you that we are much closer to 10 or 11% unemployment than we are at 5.5%. And whatever that unemployment number is, you take oil and gas out of the unemployment or out of the employment numbers, and it's turbocharged. You take this industry out of the employment numbers over the last 6 or 7 years, and I mean that number escalates tremendously. We've got trillions of dollars in debt. We have deficits as far as the eye can see. And I'm always interested in Washington of how we talk about debt and how we talk about deficits. Some would say that we should increase our debt. Some would say no. Some would say we can't afford not to. Some would say we can't afford to. But I submit to you this startling fact, or this interesting data. Not a one of you, not one public company, not one private company in America would run your debt ledger, or would that line item in your balance sheet that talks about debt. Not one company in America, public or private, would operate in debt the way the federal government does. So I ask you, if we wouldn't do it in our own companies, why do we think it's okay for the government to run debts and run deficit and continue to strap our kids and our grandkids with the burden of debt? I submit to you, every time I borrow, I take away from something in the future of my company. Not saying you shouldn't have any debt, but you consider in the United States of America, the only way the federal government can get money, one of 2 or 3 ways. The federal government gets money. They don't drill wells. They don't make boats. They don't make nuts. They don't make gadgets. They don't make air conditioners. They don't make anything. The only way the federal government, there's no such thing as government money. The only way the government can get money is to tax your personal income, tax your corporate income, or put a fee on something that we use. And there's a fourth way to do it. They can borrow it. But if they borrow it, they pay it back by taxing your personal income, taxing your corporate income, or put a government fee on something that you use. In the state of Oklahoma here 7 or 8 years ago, we were talking about taxing movie theater tickets and dry cleaning because we were so poor in how we operated our government budget. Debt and deficits. Eventually, if you're in the public sector or if you're in the private sector, eventually you're going to have to bite that bullet. Unfunded mandates. Municipalities have to deal with transportation trust funds. I was on the transportation committee when I was in Washington. Transportation trust funds. They've been depleted to the point that our roads and our bridges and our highways and our byways are falling apart all over the country. And we're struggling to come up with money to fix them. Because Washington has taken those fees that we put on airline tickets and those fees that we not only put on airline tickets, but those fees that we put on fuel at the pump, to go to the transportation trust fund, to go to transportation needs. We've abused them over the last 25 years. We've got many needs in education. We've got many needs in our municipalities, in our trust, in transportation. How do we get beyond where we are? Our politics today are too often dominated by the loudest voices on both sides. And in the name of full disclosure and transparency, I am a right-winger. I am a proud right-winger, socially and economically. But friends, we've become so concerned about the left wing and the right wing that our poor bird is dying. And she's dying quickly. Our policies, again, are too often dominated by the loudest voices on both sides, oversimplifying complicated issues. Emotion associated with the single issue has increasingly become not only who we elect to office, but also whether one's political opponent is treated with decency. We have to ask ourselves as voters, people who participate in the political process, we have to ask ourselves, is that what we want? If it is, it's not producing the results from our government that we need or that we deserve. I spent 4 years in state government and 8 years on the federal level. Over the last 10 years, I've run my own businesses, and I've sat on the boards of some outstanding public companies. I've gotten to know some outstanding leaders over the course of these last 25 or so years. And they all didn't come from one political party or one demographic. My respect for the best of those with whom I've served and worked didn't come from one vote on one position they took on any issue. Instead, it was their body of work over time as they went about the business of governing, growing their company, getting things done in Washington, creating value for employers and shareholders. So what are some of the common characteristics that I've observed from those I've admired and that I think are so needed today in Washington? One, the people that I've admired, they were genuinely interested in public service for the right reason. And friends, there's only one reason to enter the public arena, and that reason is to serve. Many things attract us to government service. Power, trying to advance our career, the cheer of the crowd that is more seductive in politics than in ministry, than in athletics. There's the common thread in business and in politics and in ministry. In those arenas that I've operated in, there's one common thread, and that's the cheer of the crowd. And it is more intoxicating in politics than any arena I've ever been in. If we're attracted to the arena to do anything other than serve, for any reason other than trying to help, to be useful, to serve others, we are drawn for the wrong reasons. Abraham Lincoln said this. He said, "We serve our party best whichever party, we serve our party best by serving our country first. The best leaders I've known in athletics and on the boards that I've sat on, in government, in business, they are inquisitive. They don't show up on day one with all the answers. They want to truly understand important and complex issues. And the issues we are dealing with in Washington, they are complex issues. They wanted to grow personally, and they're willing to listen and learn from others in order to do so. They don't have all the answers on day one. Back in 2009 and again in 2012, when I was being encouraged to run for the U.S. Senate, I was asked by the press in Oklahoma, are you going to run for public office again? And I said, I was not trying to be cute. I was honest. I said, I don't know if I qualify to run for public office today. Because you're required to have all the answers on day one. And what an injustice that is to the legislative process. When you come to the table with all the answers on day one, we put our stakes in the ground, and once we're elected, we get to Washington, and we start looking at these health care issues, and we start looking at these immigration issues, and we start looking at these tax issues, and we say, oh my goodness. This is a lot more complicated, a lot more complex than I thought. But yet we came to the table on day one. And friends, let me tell you something. Unlearning is hard. It is hard. In politics and in life. My heart tells me I want the truth. I want the truth on poverty. I want the truth on taxes. I want the truth on health care. I don't want to have to pass a bill and then we'll know what's in it once we pass it. I've always thought we should know what's in it and then pass it or defeat it. But we've got a process in Washington that some of our leaders say, let's pass it to know what's in it. I'm just baffled by that. We've got people in Washington that it's all about theory to them. It's theory. Some on the right and some on the left. It's theory to them. They can give you the recipe for the cake. They've just never cooked the cake. It's theory. I want somebody that's actually cooked the cake. They can tell you all about the oil and gas business. They've never been on a well site. They can tell you all about this regulatory policy that they create at these regulatory bodies. They've never been on a well site. They wouldn't know that 90% of the oil and gas wells in America are drilled by the 18,000 independents in America. They wouldn't know that 67% of the production in America comes from the people in this room who hold themselves out as independents. They wouldn't tell you, they wouldn't know that the average number, and they will say they're for small business. We believe in small business in America because small business in America is big business. They'll tell you that, but they wouldn't know that the average independent in America, they don't employ 11,000 people, yet their average number of employees, it's 11 people. They wouldn't know that. It's all theory. It's theory. I want somebody making decisions that's had to have 1 foot in bankruptcy and 1 foot out. I want somebody at the table that knows what it feels like to sign the front of the check, not just the back of the check. It's a different worldview when you are saying, or you have had to say, I'm at a point that this money that I've saved for my kids' education, I need it for my business. I'm going to risk my capital because I've got a product or service that I believe I can take to the marketplace and I can create a business. See, the theory says we need more taxes. I believe my experience teaches me that we don't need more taxes, we need more taxpayers. And how do you create taxpayers? You have a regulatory process, a litigation process, a tax process that will encourage people to risk their capital because they've got a product or service that they feel like they can take to the marketplace and create jobs and wealth legally. That's the American way. The people in this room, we've experienced that. We know what that feels like. The best leaders I've known in athletics, on boards, in government, they are inquisitive. Again, they don't show up on day one with all the answers. Thirdly, it goes without question that our best leaders are principled. However, the best also understand the distinction between principle and arrogance. I've seen elected officials dig in on half-baked positions and not be open to a better understanding or superior solution when one emerges. That's not principle. That's arrogance. That's pride. Good leaders honor their commitment, but are willing to honestly change their minds when it's the right thing to do. Another thing I've observed is that our best leaders are collaborative. They engage in vigorous debate. They challenge one another and look for the right answers. When the debate is finished, they work together to construct a plan that has a chance to succeed. Our society values teamwork. We value teamwork on the battlefield. We value teamwork in the workplace. We value teamwork in our families. And I know oh so well, and so does the state of Ohio, considering what happened here a couple of months ago in the national championship game. You value teamwork in athletics. Why should we not value teamwork in our government? Some would say we are in a systematic decline. I refuse to believe that. Now, I must admit that I'm an optimist. I'm an optimist by nature. I'm the kind of guy that I'd go after Moby Dick in a rowboat and take the tartar sauce with me. That's kind of my nature. We are the most economically dynamic and militarily powerful nation in the world. Now, we've taken a serious blow to that over the last 6 or 7 years. We've taken a serious blow. But throughout our history, go back and look at it. The United States has shown great capacity for renewal and revival. But if we are to have renewal and revival, we have to start with the truth. I have spent time at AA meetings observing people who enroll themselves in Alcoholics Anonymous. And everybody that I've ever known that's gone through that process, they have said to me, it starts with this one thing. You have to start with the truth and admit there's a problem. We like to talk about the mountaintop in our lives. We don't like to talk about the messy parts in our lives. We like to talk about the good things in America. We don't like to talk about the bad things in America. We like to talk about good directions. We don't like to talk about bad directions. And sometimes we get on this road going the wrong way, and I think there are some people, they passionately believe that they're going the right direction. But because they passionately believe that, doesn't make it right. It just means they're passionately wrong. So, we have to start with the truth. And I have accepted the fact in my life that the truth is not neutral. We don't want the truth to take sides. We want the truth to be neutral. And some people's truth says more litigation, more regulation, more taxation. That's the way to prosper the country. And my response to that is this. Investment capital is a coward. Republicans and Democrats both invest their money the same way. Liberals, conservatives, red, yellow, brown, black, and white, they invest their money the same way. They invest their money in an arena that they feel like they're going to get a return. And when they're looking at the prospectus, they're going to look at and say, how much is this industry regulated? How much is this industry taxed? How much is this industry litigated? And they say, no, I'm a coward. I'm not going to put my investment capital there. I'm going to put my investment somewhere else. It's a coward. It won't flow into arenas that's hostile to it. Republicans and Democrats both invest their money like that. We will not put our money in hostile arenas. So again, we should create an environment in government that encourages investment, that encourages savings, not an arena that discourages investment and discourages savings. Over the next 8 years, if you take away the tax provisions surrounding the independence in this country, you're going to wipe out $407 billion of investment over the next 8 years. You're going to wipe out 265,000 jobs by the year 2023, taking away the tax provisions. The truth is not neutral. The truth takes sides, whether we want to believe it or not. Again, America is the most economically dynamic and most militarily powerful nation in the world. Our nation has been resilient time and time and time again to renew itself and to revive itself after civil wars, after depressions. We've revived ourselves. We've renewed ourselves. There is a reason that America is the country that created the GPS and the light bulb and the telephone and the telegraph. Over the last 125 years, we've gone from Stagecoach to 747s. We've gone from Pony Express to Federal Express. We've gone from an encyclopedia to Google. My wife and I seem like every 4 months she's cleaning out the basement, or we're cleaning out the garage, or we're reframing things, or moving things around in the basement. And we had some bookshelves that we bought here, a couple that we moved from my office to our home about 2 weeks ago, and we were moving some books from the second floor of the house, from the first floor of the house to the basement. And you know what we moved? These brand new, beautiful, this beautiful brand new set of encyclopedias that we've owned for 25 years. Nobody uses encyclopedias anymore. You Google things. And then now think about how much fun, how interesting it would be. Our grandparents would be baffled at Google. Our grandparents always thought blackberry was a fruit. But do you know how interesting it would be to say to your grandmother, "Grandma, I'm going to Google you"? It's okay, kids, get back. This is fixing to get really, really interesting. But to say to your grandparents, you're going to Google them. In 1995, forget about grandparents. In 1995, when I went to Washington, then blackberry was a fruit. But today we have these handheld machines, computers, gadgets that you can get email, you can get text, you can take pictures. It is a phone. Our grandmother would be baffled to say, "Grandma, I can take a picture with my phone." And it's interesting where we've come. In Oklahoma in 1992, when I was elected to office at the Oklahoma Corporation Commission, we regulate public utilities, oil and gas, and trucking for hire in the state. In 1990, when I was elected there, we still had some parts of Oklahoma, we were on party lines. Now, you have to have gray hairs or no hairs to remember party lines. If you're 35 years or younger, you probably have no idea. I'm on college campuses, and I talk to kids about party lines. They have no idea what a party line is. But a party line is some parts of the state, some parts of your state, a respective state, and it's usually rural, the rural parts of the state. You would have 3 or 4 families using one phone line. And I would have to get on the phone and say, "Hey, Brian, get off the phone. I want to talk to my lady as well." You could pick up the phone and listen to other people's conversation. Today, over 40% of the American people do not have a landline in their home. I've got 5 kids. And I admit I am old-fashioned. I am old fogey. I've never used speed dial. I feel like I need to be punching numbers. I never had speed dial on my phone. It took me, I just started using ATM probably 10 years ago. I always felt like I needed to be talking to a live human being saying, "I want to withdraw $100 from my account." In 1992, we did away with the last elements of party lines in the state of Oklahoma. Again, today, over 40% of my kids, not a one of them have landlines. And then most of them don't want to talk on the phone, they want to text. Well, it takes me 5 minutes to respond, it takes them 5 seconds. And then I say, "This is stupid, just pick up the phone and call." But that millennial generation, they don't do the talking on the phone thing. They do texting, and they do Instagram, and they do Facebook. And I don't do Facebook. I don't do Instagram. I don't do any of that stuff. I don't want some people to know where I am. But that's where we are in America today. Amazing progress. I remember a time in my life, being 57 years of age, I remember a time growing up in Eufaula, Oklahoma, I could not swim in the public swimming pool. I had to sit in the balcony of the movie theater. People were upset that the coach had moved me to quarterback because of my skin color. Today we have a black man that's president of the United States. I didn't vote for him. I don't agree with him on most things. But I do believe it speaks to the wow factor of America. That same kid that couldn't swim in the public swimming pool ended up being a congressman in the United States House of Representatives. Friends, we live in an exceptional America. I don't want my kids or my grandkids to inherit a normal America. I want them to inherit an exceptional America. And the threat to our grandkids and our kids not inheriting an exceptional America is this. They won't or will not inherit an exceptional America if we lose our wow. Let me tell you what I mean. Back in 1996, 97, some of my Tennessee colleagues wanted me to come in and do a vacation, do some fundraising events for them. And it was in the summer, so I said, I tell you what, you guys, I'm going to bring my family and we'll just build a vacation around it, and I'll carve out time to come and do political events and fundraising events, etc. Well, they got me, my Tennessee colleagues had gotten us a little place to stay in the foothills of Tennessee and in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. And we had gone to a Cracker Barrel one morning to have breakfast, and we had 3 of our 5 kids with us, and they were, probably 12 years and younger at the time, and so we had them with us, and we went to Dollywood, and we went and saw Louise Mandrell and one of her shows, and got to know her pretty well. Went backstage and met her and Lee Greenwood, and just had a great time, and it was really a fun time. And so we were at Cracker Barrel one morning having breakfast, and I said to the young lady waiting on us, I said, Tom, I said, what are some of the must-see things? And she mentioned some of the must-see things, and a couple of them we had done, and she was about to walk off, and then she turned and she said, and oh yes, you've got to go and see the magic show. Well, although we were on vacation, I wasn't sleeping real late, but I didn't want to have to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning to go to a magic show that I knew was not magic. I don't care, I don't know what they're doing, but I know that rabbit just didn't pop up out of that hat. I have no clue how they do it, but when they saw their assistants in two, it ain't real. I don't care how far her feet is from her head, it's not magic. And so I don't read fictional books. I want nonfiction. I don't read fictional books. I want true. I want real So I didn't want to go to a magic show. And they were so excited. Oh, yeah, Daddy, let's go to the magic show. So I said, okay, let's go to the magic show. I finally gave in, so got up at 7 o'clock one morning. We went to McDonald's, and the traffic was horrible. We went through McDonald's drive-through and got some sausage biscuits and all those things, and then had just a little bit of time. And when we got to the theater, it was about 20 minutes till 10, and it started at 10. So we went in there and we sat there, and in about 5 minutes, I had just totally gotten upset with myself because I let them talk me into coming to a magic show. I said, JC, you're the adult. You know better than that. It ain't magic. So finally the show started. 10 minutes into it, I'm kind of sitting up a little straighter in my chair, and 15 minutes into this, I'm getting a little more impressed. After 20 minutes, man, I'm elbowing my kids. And, did you see that? I can't believe he made that rabbit pop up out of his head. How did he do that? Pour that milk in the hat and then turn it over and nothing spills on the floor. Did you see he sawed his assistant in two and her feet was 10 yards from her head? Can you believe it? And I was acting like a 9-year-old. And I think it was a little bit embarrassing for my wife, but I had just totally gotten into this magic show that wasn't a magic show. And afterwards, I did something that I hardly ever do. I stood in line to get this guy's autograph. And we went up there and we talked to him, and I said to him, I said, sir, I told him who I was, and ironically, he knew me and said, yes, Congressman, I know you, and we talked and, had some niceties. And I told him, I said, I got to tell you, I was wowed by what you did. And I said, and I came here, I was not, I said, I'm a hard sell. And he said, hey, I know. He said, it's not magic. And he kind of gave me a little bit of insight. He said, it's not magic. He said, it is entertainment. I said, but I was wowed by it. He said, well, I thank you. And we talked. And so he signed some things for my kids, and we left. And I've often thought about that when I look at the landscape of America. Friends, we're losing our wow. We live in the greatest nation known to man. I'm a testimony to it. Some of you in this room, you've probably obtained a degree of success that you probably never thought in your wildest dreams that you would ever obtain because of the opportunities that this country affords us. We're losing our wow. Again, the telephone, the telegraph. We can go to any city in America. They could parachute us into any city in America. We could have never have been in that city before in our lives. And because of this gadget called the iPhone that has a GPS on it, we ask old Siri to give us an address or a name, and we can find our way to anywhere we want to go. To say I can risk my capital to create a future for my family. Friends, that's pretty special. This place that you and I call home and the rest of the world calls America, it's a pretty special place. And we have to get up every single day engaged in the process of sustaining the greatness of these United States of America. Thank you very much for letting me come.